as communities around the world gathered to pay respects to their fallen soldiers and to show appreciation for their veterans and soldiers who are involved in current conflicts, the city of Brantford held its own remembrance ceremony in War Memorial Park. As residents gathered around the cenotaph, wreaths were laid at the base of the monument by local veterans, scouting groups, and other community members. Once the color party and cadets marched into position, pilots Martin Matz and Danny Richer gave a Remembrance Day flypass above the cenotaph. After the singing of the national anthem, a few remarks were made before the playing of the last post and a moment of silence.
So today in all part of this world, everybody is celebrating a time together. So today, once again, the people of the world gather in a celebration of freedom, not forgetting those who paid the cost, that we may stand here today and say thank you. At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, time stands still for a moment. We remember those who died, not for war, but for the world, that would be free and at peace.
One salute, present, arms!
On behalf of the mothers of all those who've given their lives, Gail Leary and Helen Zudima laid the wreath which was once called the Silver Cross wreath upon the cenotaph.
They're laying it on the tomb behind me of the unknown soldier. And now on behalf of the Government of Canada, Phil McComan, Member of Parliament for Brant, on behalf of the Government of Ontario, Dave Levac, Member of Provincial Parliament for Ontario, and the mayors of our municipalities, Chris Friel for Brantford and Ron Eddy for the County of Brant.
As the ceremony progressed, some of Brantford's youth spoke about what Remembrance Day means to them. Representing the Brant Haldimand Norfolk Catholic District School Board was Jacob Gaudet, followed by Jackson Tinker of the Grand Erie District School Board, Sean Morgan of the Ecole Elementary Catholique, and Kenan Benjamins of the Brantford Christian School.
I was asked to speak on Remembrance Day, on what Remembrance Day means to me. So last Friday, I decided to ask my grandmother, or Oma as I like to call her, about the Second World War and what she remembers. She told me about the night she found out that the war had started. She was 10 years old and she was spending the night at her grandparents' house. She was already lying in her bed, but she was still awake. And through the door she could hear grandparents talking. Her grandmother's voice sounded very worried, and all my Oma heard was, "It's war." She said her stomach clenched tight and she didn't know what to feel except fear. In the morning they brought her home and she and her sisters went to go outside and play. But her mother stopped her and told them to play inside, just in case there was shooting in the streets. She didn't want them to get hit by a stray bullet. That night in the distance, she could hear the whine of airplanes dropping bombs, and when she and her sisters crept to the window, they could see the fire in the big cities from where the bombs landed. She told me the things she remembers the most about war: bullets, fear of losing a loved one, and an empty stomach. Throughout the war, she often had to play inside, and everyone had to be inside by 8 o'clock. Finally, one day, Canadian soldiers came and freed her town. The war was over, and she described people greeting their neighbors, dancing in the street, That night there was no curfew and she remembers being allowed to stay up late. Part of the reason she and my Opa later moved to Canada was because they really appreciated the way Canada helped their country during the war. But today there are still wars happening right now. Today there are still kids stuck behind their doors. Kids who are afraid of stray bullets and kids who are hungry. But thankfully there are still Canadian soldiers who are fighting to give them the same that my Oma had and the same freedom we have today. We should pray for them and support and thank your soldiers who fight for the freedom of others. May God keep your land glorious and free.
After the youth speeches, the Brant Men of Song led the community celebration in the singing of God Save the Queen, and as the color party left the cenotaph, members of Brantford's 56th Regiment placed their poppies on the wreaths that had been laid earlier. Reporting for BrantNews.com, I'm Eric Lloyd.